So, hello again. Before we start looking at the 10 different schools of strategy, then let's have a look at the introduction to the strategy safari. And what is strategy actually? The way you want to walk to achieve your objectives, or something completely different. If you go on Google and try to find out what strategy is, you'll get a lot of different proposals. I think there's something like 275 million different proposals if you go in and Google what is strategy. So no doubt that this is something which can be discussed quite a lot, and no wonder that it's difficult to find out what this is all about. Back in 1987, Mintzberg came up with 5 different P's to be able to define what strategy is. We'll have a short look at these 5 P's. The first of the P's are defined to plan. Strategy as a plan, which means that it is intended, which means that you're looking ahead and you're trying to find out what future choices you can take. It's done in advance, it's done on purpose, and it's probably what most organizations believe that they are doing when they talk about strategy. Looking back at my time in Nestle, I truly believe that was the way that we were working with strategy in that company, at least in the beginning of my career some years ago in there. The second P is for pattern, and this is where you look at your history, you look at what you have been doing before, and you create your strategy based on that. What was successful in the past will probably also be successful in the future. Could that be a company like Maersk until they made the latest substantial changes? Maybe. Strategy as a position looks at where we are and how we can differentiate ourselves from the others, from the competition. It therefore looks out at the surroundings, but it also looks at a specific point where you want your customers to meet your products, thereby creating the necessary success. The fourth view is strategy as a perspective, and this is where the organization has a collective concept of how the future should look. It's highly shared within the organization, and it gives a specific culture to the organization. It looks into the organization, and it looks up at the grand vision that the organization wants to achieve. This could, for instance, be a company like Tesla, the exam case company that we had a couple of years ago. And finally, we have the last P, which is strategy as a ploy, where we are trying to outwit the competitor and thereby hiding the real strategy. Maybe that could be Apple when they're talking about the Apple TV all the time, but not really anything seems to come from it while they're focusing on something else like their software. However you define a strategy, you have an intent with your strategy. And if it comes through, or the parts of it that come through, can be called a deliberate strategy, thereby turning into the realized strategy. But there will also be part of your strategy that will not be realized, and there will be parts that will be added on during the period of the strategy. This is what we call emergent strategies. Let me give you an example. Some years ago I was fortunate to work in Ukraine for Nestle, and I came down there to build the distribution and sales organization. We had an intended strategy that said that we should go for the big outlets so that we as fast as possible could build volume in the country. But because of the way that the market moved, quite a lot of that never became realized and thereby ended up as unrealized strategy. On the other hand, we found out that we had an opportunity to deliver directly to a number of smaller outlets with a very specific assortment, and that emerged as strategies along the way during the first couple of years while I was there. Thereby having part of the deliberate strategy delivering to the bigger outlets, and the emergent strategy delivering to the smaller outlets becoming the realized strategy, thereby partly deliberately and partly as something that we learned along the way, becoming a strategic success. But do we need strategies? There are many good things about strategies, but there are also things that can be dangerous for the organization. Strategy sets a direction. It ensures that you know in what way the company should run, and thereby makes it much easier to run the company for the management. It puts a course out, and it ensures that everybody are moving in the same direction. The problem is if that direction is wrong. I'm sure that Nokia, for instance, had a strategy, and I'm sure that it was believed that this was the right direction they were moving, but on the other hand, it proved to be devastating in the end. Strategy also makes sure that the company focuses effort if it is carried out in the right way. It means that you can have fewer objectives in the company. It means that you can work across the silos that exist in most companies, because it promotes coordination and it reduces the disorder that exists from one part of the organization to another. But on the other hand, it might also mean that it's difficult to be different and to think differently in the organization, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It also very much defines the organization, defines the culture when you have a strategy. It means that it captures the meaning of the company, the essentials of the company, and it creates a shared identity. That's very much what we had in Nestle, where we talked about the Nestle way. On the other hand, it also means that you risk losing the richness of the company, and you easily get into stereotypes when you talk about what is happening across the company. And that was also one of the risks when we talked about Nestle, or when we talked about the Nestle way, because we definitely lost some of the possibilities that we could have just picked up, because we were thinking the Nestle way and thereby was not able to get out of the normal thinking. The last thing is that strategy provides consistency in what is happening in the organization. It reduces the ambiguity and explains the world. It makes it possible for you as an employee to see the world in a specific way. The problem is that it might reduce the creativity and make things simple, so you don't see the differences that are necessary, for instance, when you go from one market to another, and thereby you might be losing, again, innovation, for instance. Whatever you believe, there are a number of areas of agreement between people looking at strategy. It definitely affects the overall welfare of the organization. It means something for everybody in the organization, the way that the organization is working, the way that people are behaving, etc. It concerns both the organization but also the environments of the organization. It definitely concerns and has an influence on the stakeholders of the organization, whether this, for big companies, are the authorities, or for many other companies, for instance, also the customers, etc. And having a strategy also means that you have very complex trade-offs. There are things you can do, but that means that there are other things that you cannot do. You also have to be aware that the strategy is formed on different levels in the organization, and that it involves issues which are related both to the content but also to the process in itself. So strategy in that way is a two-edged sword. Now let's move to these 10 schools of strategy, these 10 schools of thought. See you next time.